Okay, so thank you very much, Botjan, and thank you very much to our host for inviting me to speak here today. I'm going to talk today about Ireland's land use review that we're currently undertaking at the moment. We're right in the middle of this, so I don't necessarily have a final plan or strategy that I can share with you today. So I'll spend quite a bit of the talk sort of setting out the context to land use in Ireland, and then talk through the process of what we're doing with our land use review as well. So I should also sort of say at the beginning that, like Lotta, I'm very new to the LULUCF sector. Even I've been in it even less time than a year. And also, as she mentioned, Ireland are one of the countries that the new LULUCF regulation poses a lot of challenges for. And we've sort of been actively involved in the negotiations around that, primarily in relation to our organic soils. Hopefully a little bit more of that will become clear in the presentation as well. So before I get into the details of the land use review, basically, I sort of want to sort of set the scene with what came out of one of our State of the Environment reports recently, and that was essentially that land mapping approaches were really needed to improve in Ireland in order to support our government decision making. So a lot of work was taken developing land cover maps and landscape classification maps, and ideally one of the outcomes of the land use review would actually be to have spatial planning tools that would help you make land use decisions. So not just tools that, for example, might help you decide where the best place to plant trees would be, because existing policy and tools help support those sort of decisions, but to help you make maybe more complex choices, to weigh up a choice, for example, of where to plant trees against other choices such as siting renewable energy, or the sort of socioeconomic considerations that might be there. What regions of the country need job stimulation or jobs to transition from older fossil fuel focused industries, and or sort of say, for example, how a suite of measures might help you address really complex challenges like the diversification of agriculture. So it's really to try and harmonise and synchronise a lot of existing policy, see what the gaps are, and see what other information we need in order to help us make those decisions. And ideally to have spatial tools to help us support that. So this map here in the center, this sort of infographic, basically splits up our land cover, and I know that's different from land use. But as you'll see there, the sort of the bottom section of the map represents our agricultural land cover, and that accounts for about 68% of the land in Ireland. So really high. You can compare that against the EU average of 39%. So a lot of agricultural land in Ireland. The characteristics of our farms in Ireland is that they're predominantly small farms. Typically, the sort of the average farm size is 48 hectares, and we've actually got about 40% of our farms that are under 20 hectares. So really quite small farms. Another big feature of the agricultural scene in Ireland is that we have a very small land market. Annually, you only get about 1% of agricultural land coming to market. So the majority of land transactions happen through inheritance, and as a result, there's a big land leasing market in Ireland, which historically developed around short-term leases, essentially to protect the landowner. And the government in recent years have implemented a lot of policies in order to try and extend the leasing system to longer-term leases in order to allow farmers to to have a long enough lease to invest in sustainable practices. So the picture around agriculture in Ireland is that it's a very predominant sector. It involves larger proportions of the population than might be the case elsewhere in Europe. Predominantly smaller farms, and these are farms that people or families, I should say, may have built up over generations, acquiring bits of land from neighbours as and when they become available. So that sort of sets the social context a little bit as well. So just then looking at our forestry sector, our forests represent quite a small amount of land cover in Ireland. You can see we are right down at the bottom in the EU, only just above Malta, which is sort of between 0 and 1%. We're up at 11% at the moment, and we really need to get a lot higher than that. But we've actually come quite a long way with our forestry over the last century. Ireland's forests, they basically established themselves at the end of the last ice age, and our sort of pollen studies have indicated that we had between 80 and 90% land cover with forestry at the start of Neolithic times. In Neolithic times, that's basically when our land sort of clearance for agricultural purposes started. That basically continued up until the start of the 20th century. Around the 1600s, we had about 20% of our land cover remained with forests. And following the plantations in Ireland, and then later on following, there was a lot of deforestation to support construction in the British Empire and the British Navy. That basically brought us down to 1.4% at the start of the 20th century around the formation of our state. So we've actually increased by an order of magnitude up to today, but it's still very, very low in terms of overall cover. So if you look at the last couple of decades, you can sort of see this sort of darker shade of green here, or sort of greeny brown, shows that we've been planting trees at a much higher rate than most of the rest of Europe, and we're about 2.5 times the European average. So we're trying to play catch up quite a bit. Most of our big forestation programs started in the 1950s and 60s with our state forestry body Quilcha, and then in the 1990s this extended to schemes targeted at private landowners. But the picture hasn't always been positive either. So we've had quite a lot of issues with monoculture, clear felling, all of the problems that come with that, planting on what's been referred to as in the wrong places, and the wrong trees. So we've got a lot of Sitka spruce. It makes up over half of our forests in Ireland. And there's been issues with planting forestry on peat soils, which basically sucks a lot of the water out of the peat and causes issues with watercourses and fish hatcheries and so on and so forth. So you can sort of see here, this is basically just a map showing the amount of forest land across Europe on organic soils. So the EU average is at about 8%, and we have about 60% of our forestry on organic or peaty soils. And the next highest country is Finland, but there's a big jump there. That's sort of down to 27%. So it's really, really quite high. And again, this is one of the reasons that the LULUCF regulations give us a lot of challenges. So in order to get up to our sort of target figure of 18%, we've got a lot of tree planting to do, and it's not as simple as planting just these extra trees down here, because a lot of our trees are on the wrong type of soil. So when they get cut down, we shouldn't replant them. So really, we've got actually a lot more work to do in order to get up to that 18%. I'm going to fly through a few of these because I can see I'm running quite tight in time. One of our other issues is that we also have a lot of grasslands on organic soils. So every year we have emissions of 9 megatons coming off our grasslands, and that's not even near balanced by a sink of about 2 megatons from our grasslands on mineral soils. So again, big issues there presented by our organic soils. And we've been doing a lot in recent years to rehabilitate peatlands that have been commercially exploited in the past. So we've got a big scheme at the moment, which is a 108 million euro scheme to rehabilitate 33,000 hectares of peatlands that would have been extracted to go into our peat-fired power stations, and hopefully that will sort of have a big impact on our LULUCF emissions as well. Again, I'll just skip through all of those and just say a few points then on our National Land Use Review itself. We're basically sort of looking to sort of balance all of the different considerations in order to support our decisions. But really, one of the kind of key things to note there is that government is really sort of placing farmers at the centre of this. So a lot of land use plans and policies, if you look internationally, are focused more sort of on the urban environment. Ours is very much focused on rural areas, and not just agriculture, but obviously things like the siting of renewable energy and so on and so forth. So at the moment we're in our first phase, and this is basically our evidence gathering phase. We are later going to move on to our strategy, and we've sort of made a lot of effort to sort of delineate the two of those and not have our evidence review preempt the strategy in any way. And our evidence review should be complete this September. It's primarily being managed by our Environmental Protection Agency. They're basically an independent body that sit under our Department of Environment, but they're very importantly a very widely sort of trusted organisation. So in terms of the different things that will feed into this, in terms of the people, this is basically who is impacted or who sort of influences the land sector. And so a lot of this work is looking at what the land ownership in Ireland actually is, how much of it is public, how much of it is private, and what type of lands are owned. And then in terms of policy, this is basically trying to catalogue our own existing policy, and we've also commissioned a series of studies looking at international policy and plans. And then we've a huge body of work looking at the different indicators. Our first sort of list that we've put together have been from existing indicators from these sources here, and we're just then going to sort of look at what gaps we have and see what other indicators might need further work in order to sort of fit with our needs. We're hoping to basically have these on a traffic light system of sort of red, amber, green, and then for some of them to produce geographic maps for those as well. Our sort of other sort of theme then is suitability, and this is sort of looking at what's sort of being done internationally, particularly where people have land use policy that relates to rural land, as I mentioned earlier, and then also sort of looking at the feasibility of translating our land cover map into a land use map, and the work that needs to be done to bridge that gap. Again, I will skip over these. And finally, just sort of say that we've also sort of commissioned studies to basically look at the socioeconomic impacts and develop a framework for how these decisions are influenced basically by economic, social, and our kind of natural capital decisions. Basically, looking at the different enabling factors, the different actions that need to be taken. And the impacts that these might have, and the sort of positive and negative outcomes that might be associated with these. I can see that I've run over time, so I will leave it at that and say thank you.